Beyond Reason Radio.
Jeb and I were too young to remember the pain and agony he and Mom felt when our 3-year-old sister died. We only learned later that Dad, a man of quiet faith, prayed for her daily. He was sustained by the love of the Almighty and the real and enduring love of her mom. Dad always believed that one day he would hug his precious Robin again.
That was from George W. Bush's eulogy today for his father, Bush 41, George Herbert Walker Bush. The funeral was today in Washington, D.C. He gave a really moving eulogy, and I wanted to play a little bit of that because that shows right there. I thought that clip really showed the character of Bush 41 and how he really was a man of faith. And that kind of goes into what I want to start the show out with today. And my question for you is this. What makes a man? What does it mean to be a man? And I'm not saying biologically. That's a whole nother subject. You have to get into it with the left of what biologically it means. It didn't used to be a debate, but apparently it is now. But no, I mean, what does it mean to be manly? To be a man? To be seen as someone who is manly? Who is tough? And there really is a lot of debate to that, especially in politics. And I think we can learn from Bush 41, and I'm going to tell you why in a second. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We are on till 9 p.m. tonight right here on News Radio 93.1 WFLA, and of course on Facebook Live as well, just like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. We're going to talk about that and so much more. And of course, we have Mr. Tom Benson, who is here as well. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing fine. The pageantry today of the funeral service was quite remarkable.
Yeah.
It was hard not to watch it, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, and as you mentioned when we were talking right before the show, it was kind of the one time where people put politics aside, and you had Trump sitting next to the Obamas, sitting next to the Clintons, sitting next to Jimmy Carter. I mean, where else are you going to find that? Not many other places is that going to happen.
Aside from the eulogy today by W, I think the most riveting moment of the past few days is when Senator Bob Dole saluted the casket yesterday. The emotion on his face after the salute just spoke volumes. It was not only a salute to a former president, it was a salute to a comrade in arms.
Right.
They both served in World War II, and not together, but during the war.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're just seeing more and more of those World War II vets passing away. And, I have a lot of respect for Bob Dole. A few years ago, I went on an honor flight with Bud in the morning show. An honor flight is where they fly veterans up to D.C. for the day for free so they can see the Washington memorials and monuments in D.C., especially the World War II memorial, which a lot of vets have not been able to see. And when we got there, Bob Dole was there.
Wow.
In front of the memorial. He can't walk. He's in a wheelchair. He can barely speak. And he made sure he was there to introduce or, I guess, visit the veterans who were there.
Yeah. He's 95 now.
Yeah, I know. So that was, a few years ago. He was in his 90s. I mean, this is a guy who ran for president, senator. And he doesn't need to do that. Nobody would think otherwise if he didn't, but he knew he had to. And apparently he did that every day or every honor flight for years. I don't know if he still does it. I think he still does visit some of these vets at the memorial. He makes sure he's there. And after seeing that, I gained so much respect for him. Really, really did. And he was not doing it for himself. He was doing it for them. So back to the question that I was starting out the show with. What does it mean to be a man? Because in today's political world, I often hear that what we have to do is, and not even just in politics, just in society in general, I face this a lot. Because I tend to be too nice. I'm a nice guy. I tend to be, believe it or not, I can be pretty quiet in public. I was very shy growing up, didn't talk to anyone. And I was just kind of this guy who didn't ruffle feathers too much. And when you're like that, and Bush 41 was like that, people kind of think, oh, well, you're not tough. You're not manly. You're a wimp. To be a man, you have to be brash. You have to be arrogant. You have to be in people's faces. You have to be willing to hit. And I hear this all the time, and I'm thinking, is that true? Is that the way it really should be? Is that what really makes a man, or no? I think one thing we can learn from Bush 41 is that that is not what makes a man, in my opinion. So years ago, on Face the Nation, I have audio here, Bush 41 was asked on Face the Nation. This is when Reagan was running for president. And he was asked, you know, some people say you're kind of a wimp. His response to this might be the best response I've ever heard to that. I did not hear this until this week. Remember, when George Bush was president, I was in single digits in my years, okay? Believe it or not, he's the first president that I actually remember being president. You know, I was alive when Reagan was president, but Reagan left when I was 2 years old, so I don't remember that. But I remember George Bush, and I remember him running against Clinton. That's really the first presidential election I actually have a memory of. I know I'm making Tom Benson feel really old right now, but it's true.
I tell you, Sonny.
It's true. But I had never heard this or seen this until this week because Face the Nation posted it again. And, I just want to play it for you. Here it is.
Even your friends of the minority who know who you are and who admire you in the party, one of the things that always comes up is that maybe George Bush is too nice a guy to be president. Maybe he's not tough enough.
Yeah, I've heard
if you
that.
Can't take out after, what about the tough enough question and
well,
start
tough
it out?
Enough
But if
is
you
I
want to take out after these other
equate
guys,
toughness with just attacking some individual. I equate toughness with moral fiber, with character, with principle, with demonstrated leadership in tough jobs where you emerge, not bullying somebody, but with the respect of the people you led. That's toughness. That's fiber. That's character. I've got it, and if I happen to be decent in the process, that should not be a liability.
I could not agree with that statement more. I think he is exactly right, and I think more and more people in today's world really need to hear that. Because we think of outward toughness, of how loud you are. That's what makes you tough. And George Bush, he was the opposite. But he's asked that question. He says, no, that's not what makes you tough. That's not what makes you a man. What makes you a man is your moral fiber, your character. Character is so important. Your principles, standing up for the truth. And if you're nice in the process, he says at the end, if you're nice in the process, that isn't a liability. Of course it isn't. It shouldn't be a liability. But in today's world, especially in today's political world, it is. If you're too nice, people don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear from you if you're a really nice guy. If you're nice to the people even who disagree with you, no, they would rather hear the people that are the most controversial, the loudest, the brashest, the meanest. That's how it is in today's world on both sides. On both sides. And, you know, I was thinking about this, and I know there's a lot of Christians that listen to the show. You all know that I am a Christian. And there's a lot of Christians who, when I bring stuff like this up, they kind of disagree with me. They kind of don't like it. But the answer to this, and where Bush really is getting this moral philosophy, is from the Bible, is from Jesus, who, of course, we're celebrating his birthday soon, December 25th. But this is an issue that even came up back then, when Jesus was here with the disciples. And the disciples didn't really understand this kind of thing. I'm reading here from Luke chapter 22, and it's very interesting. It says, and there arose also a dispute among them, the disciples, they're with Jesus, as to which one of them was regarded to be the greatest. And he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who have authority over them are called benefactors. But it is not this way with you. But the one who is the greatest among you must become like the youngest, and the leader like a servant. For who is greater, the one who reclines at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who reclines at the table? But I am among you as the one who serves. There was another time as well, I don't have the scripture in front of me, but there was another time where the disciples were arguing about that. And he said, the one who was like the little child is the greatest. The least among you is the greatest. That's what Bush was getting at. That's what we should get at, that if you are a servant, that you should be the greatest. If you have humility, that is what makes you a man. And this isn't coming from me or even Bush. This is coming from Jesus. Okay, I think Jesus has some authority in this. Now, does this mean that, okay, well, if you're too nice, does this mean you have to give up your principles? Well, no, of course not. Being tough isn't on the outside, but it's on the inside, and it's making that final decision and standing up for the truth. That's what it means to be tough. You can scream and yell all you want, but a lot of people that scream and yell don't know what it means to actually have character, to actually have a moral center, to actually stand up for what is right and what is truth. You can be kinder and gentler and a man of reason, but also be a man who sticks up for the truth. One of the disciples that Jesus was talking to there was Peter. And Peter, later in his life, would later write this in 2 Peter. This is from 2 Peter, chapter 1, verse 5. He said, now for this very reason also, applying all diligence in your faith, supply moral excellence, and in your moral excellence, knowledge, and in your knowledge, self-control, and in your self-control, perseverance, and in your perseverance, godliness, and in your godliness, brotherly kindness, and in your brotherly kindness, love. For if these qualities are yours and are increasing, they render you neither useless nor unfruitful in the true knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. So this is someone who understood the message. And what does he say there? He says, yes, you have to stand up for knowledge and you have to persevere, but you also have to be kind. You also have to love, and you also have to have self-control. That's what it means to be a man. Now, I will say this about George H.W. Bush. There was one issue with him in talking that I think he should have been a little bit tougher on. The one biggest problem with George H.W. Bush is that he was somewhat indecisive about things at times. He says right there he's a man of character and principles, and I think he is in a personal sense. And I think we could learn a lot from him. But there were times where he would kind of really fret over things and try to be more practical. And I think he was really afraid to actually stand up for what he truly believed in. You know, when he made that famous speech and said, read my lips, no new taxes, and then later he caved on it, and you hear, well, this is about compromise and all of that. If he really believed what he said at the time he said it, and really believed it was the truth, that we didn't need new taxes, but what we needed were spending cuts, and if at least we were going to get taxes, we needed more spending cuts, then he should have stuck by his principles, even in the face of Democratic opposition. And that's some kind of toughness that he really should have shown later. That doesn't mean he has to be arrogant or brash or anything, but that's some kind of toughness that he should have shown that he did not show. But this brings me to today, of course, because people might think I'm just doing this to criticize President Trump. I know some of you are listening right now and thinking that I'm just doing this to bash Trump. I have talked about on the show before that I don't like a lot of Trump's tactics. I don't like a lot of what goes on, because I think Trump can be a bully sometimes, and I think Trump isn't always godly like he should be. But I will say this. I understand it to a point, and I understand why it's difficult to be like Bush, like what he said there. Trust me, I live it. Because the world doesn't understand it. And the left especially doesn't understand it. And politicians especially don't understand it. And many people feel like in their desperation, in their exasperation by the corruption that is in Washington, D.C., we need someone who isn't just tough, but in your face and is a fighter and just will do whatever it takes. Doesn't matter if it's good, right, or wrong, as long as they're punching. And I understand that. I don't think it's the right way to go, but I understand it. But I'll tell you this: if you're a Christian and you really believe what Jesus said, and you really believe that it's moral fiber and character that really makes you a man, and you can do that in gentleness and love, the world's never going to understand it because we live in a fallen world. It's just the reality. But if you act that way, you can be a shining light to the rest of the world. And I think that is something that we could really learn from our former president. May he rest in peace. 407-916-5400. You can text to 23680 where standard message and data rates apply. So speaking of faith, we're in the Christmas season, and a lot of people who celebrate Christmas celebrate it because they're Christians, and they want to have a time to celebrate the birth of Christ, the Advent season, and all of that. Well, of course, there are some people out there who really don't like that, at least in the public square, because they're not Christians, and they're offended by Christian symbols, and they are working to undermine it. And they're using the Constitution to do it, and I'm going to tell you why they're wrong. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Download the iHeartRadio app and catch the Beyond Reason Radio podcast. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
Yes, welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio, Orlando's Smart Talk Radio. We are on until 9 p.m. tonight right here on News Radio 93.1 WFLA. But, of course, if you miss any of the show, you can catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. And, of course, it's the Christmas season. And usually it's supposed to be a season that makes people happy and joyful and peace among men, goodwill, all of that stuff. But some people don't like that. In fact, some people really don't like even seeing like a Christmas tree. If you say Merry Christmas, they really don't like it. Okay, it's a small minority, but this small minority is really trying to make a statement, especially in the city of Chicago, in the Illinois capital, actually in the Illinois State House. What happened is in the rotunda this month, you go in there, in the State House, in the rotunda, and you could find that there's a nativity scene for Christmas, there's a menorah for Hanukkah, and then there's something a little different. It's an arm holding an apple with a snake coiled around it. That's right. It's a gift from the Chicago branch of the Satanic Temple, and it's called the Snaketivity. And it also has a sign that reads, "Knowledge is the greatest gift." I kid you not, this is what's happening now at the state capitol in Illinois in Christmas. And of course they're using the First Amendment, saying, well, this is the First Amendment. This is freedom of speech. In fact, I have the news report here from the local CBS affiliate out there in Illinois, and they had a reporter actually go and see it and talk about it, and here's that report.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas and like Hanukkah here at the state capitol, and now like, winter solstice, I suppose. We have some video of the new decorations that are here at the Capitol. It was last week during the hustle and bustle of veto session when all of these holiday decorations started going up, mostly behind the scenes. Folks were busy walking through, and some didn't stop to take notice. Well, it was earlier this week when we saw a new addition. There's the manger scene with baby Jesus, and there's the candlesticks and the menorah for Hanukkah. Both of those put up by religious groups. Well, those groups not too thrilled with this latest installment, a statue from the Satanic Temple of Chicago. Now, Secretary of State Jesse White's office runs the State House here and all the different facilities. A spokesman for White told me that their message, emblazoned on the front of the statue, that knowledge is the greatest gift, he said, quote, "I don't know how anyone can find that offensive." I talked with several state employees who work in and walk through these halls at the State House every day, and several of them, they didn't want to go on camera, but they said they found it offensive to them personally and felt that it was also sort of an insult that if Satan were to have a birthday, well, then schedule your decoration. Then don't try to upstage this Christmas or Hanukkah. But that was their feeling, and, well, there's a lot of mixed reactions at the State House. But then again, there's a wide range of opinions anytime you mix politics with religion.
By the way, there's also a sign out there from the Freedom from Religion Foundation marking the winter solstice and asserting that religion is but a myth and superstition that hardens hearts and enslaves minds. So why do you think this is happening? Why do you think the Satanic Temple is doing this? Why do you think the Freedom from Religion Foundation is doing this? They're putting up this stuff there. Do you think it's because they just really believe in freedom of religion and freedom of speech? Do you think it's really that they just love the Constitution and love the Bill of Rights so much that this is just a sign of how much they support freedom?
What are you smoking?
Yeah, exactly. What this is all about, and this has been going on for years now, it's happened in certain places in Florida as well. What this is all about is basically certain groups that hate Christianity, and they want to undermine it every single way they possibly can. That's what this is about. This is about a group who hates Christianity, and even though right now the majority of people are Christians, or at least celebrate Christmas in some way, they don't like that. And they don't want any signs of Christianity at all in the public square at all. And their goal is not to have, a wide array of voices out there for people to see. No, their goal is to make it so confusing every time a state tries to do something like this that eventually the state government just says nothing. We don't want anything then. That's the goal here. Especially from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. I've talked about them before. I mean, the literal name of their organization says it, Freedom from Religion. Their whole purpose is that we should have freedom from religion and that there can't be any kind of religion whatsoever in any type of government building or government institution or anything. And that their whole goal is to make it so there's nothing in the state capitol on Christmas. And there's nothing in the state capitol on Easter. And there's no signs. And there's nothing dealing with God. There's nothing dealing with Christianity or anything. That is the goal because they hate Christianity and they want to undermine it in our society. Now, when we get back from the break, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this and how I think it is totally misguided to suggest that what this is really just implementing the First Amendment, that this is really what the Founding Fathers wanted and believed when they put forward the Constitution, when they talked about religious freedom, and when they put forward the First Amendment. I think that is, BS. And I'll talk about that next. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
You know what's beyond reason? Yaffee is now on YouTube. Go to YouTube now and just search Beyond Reason Radio. This is Orlando's Smart Talk Radio. Beyond Reason Radio continues now.
Well, of course, because it's 2018 and almost 2019, we have to politicize everything. And there's some things going on all over the news I've noticed today and all over social media criticizing what certain things that happened at the Bush funeral, what the Trumps did. And, I'm going to get to that in a sec because it really is just beyond reason. But in the last segment, I was talking about the fact that in the State House in Illinois, under the rotunda, they usually put up decorations for Christmas and Hanukkah and so forth but you have the Satanic Temple and then you have the Freedom from Religion Foundation and others who decided, well, if you're going to have a Christian thing, if you're going to have a Christmas tree, which, necessarily isn't just Christian, some Christmas decorations have pagan roots, but that's a whole nother subject. But they have to have the satanic thing. So they have a snake holding, what was it again? It was a snake holding up an apple. And it's basically there to bash Christianity. Now, let's see here. This is the sign that stands nearby all of it that apparently puts forward a civics lessons. This is what it says. It says, the state of Illinois is required by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution to allow temporary public displays in the state capitol so long as these displays are not paid for by taxpayer dollars. Because the first floor of the Capitol Rotunda is a public place, state officials cannot legally censor the content of speech or displays. The United States Supreme Court has held that public officials may legally impose reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions regarding displays and speeches, but no regulation can be based on the content of the speech. So the way they're interpreting the First Amendment of the Constitution, and I guess they're kind of interpreting a Supreme Court ruling that way, is that, well, basically this is what the First Amendment means, that if you have a state house, which is a public area because it's a government area, that you have to have displays, and if you have displays, you can manage some reasonable time and so forth, but you have to let all these displays out. Even on Christmas, you have to have satanic displays, because this is what the founders meant. Because this is what they meant when they wrote the First Amendment. Is it really what they meant? It's nonsense to think that the founders put forward the First Amendment, thought about freedom of religion, and thought this is what they were meaning. Of course not. Of course not. The reason why we have the First Amendment of the United States, there's a couple of different reasons. But one of the main reasons was because they didn't want the state to force you into a certain religion and to prevent you from being able to practice or believe in your religion in public. One of the main reasons it was put forward is before the founding of America, when we were still colonies, there were certain colonies where you had this new group of Christians called Baptists. I know it's funny to think that they were new. They're very established now, but at the time they were kind of a new up-and-coming denomination of Christians in the American continent. And they were Baptists, and you had some Baptist preachers that would go out and preach the word and preach their religion. And there were a lot of those in the established churches in the colonies who really didn't like that, who didn't like that at all. So what they would do is they would pass laws and they would pass ordinances against the Baptist preachers from being able to preach their religion in public. They would say it's disturbing of the peace. So they would actually arrest Baptist preachers from preaching the gospel, basically, from being able to practice their religion. And you had certain people like James Madison and George Mason, who wrote the Declaration of Rights in the Virginia Constitution, and that's where James Madison got a lot of his influence in writing the Bill of Rights for the United States Constitution. They saw these things growing up. They saw these things happening, and they were disturbed by it. So they wanted to put forward in an American Constitution and in a Bill of Rights the idea that, okay, we're not going to have the state arrest you for merely practicing the religion you want. So they put forward the First Amendment of the United States. The basic point was that the state could not influence the church. So if you had a church, they wouldn't have the power of the state behind them to force other people into the religion, to force other people into the church, and you would also not have the state corrupting the church as well. It would go both ways. But to say that means that the state cannot have certain practices dealing with religion, it's just not true. And how do I know that? Because James Madison himself, who wrote the First Amendment, who was putting forward these ideas, who eventually got it ratified in Congress, when he became president later, he actually put forward a Thanksgiving declaration to God. And if you read that declaration to God, it talks about God. It talks about thanksgiving to our Creator. It's a very religious statement. Well, how could he do that? He was president. That's by the state. I thought there had to be a separation of church and state. The idea of separation of church and state was literally the church. Well, it's not in the Constitution, separation of church and state, but the idea was literally the organization of the church. That's what it means. It didn't mean that government officials or government bodies could not have certain religious customs put forward. So I think the idea that the Illinois State House says we have to do this. No, they don't have to do this. That's not what the First Amendment is all about. The First Amendment, yes, gives the right of the Satanic temple. It gives them the right to exist. It gives them the right for those who believe in that to practice that so-called religion however they want. Or if they are atheists, they can be atheists and they don't have to have any kind of fear from the state. That's what the First Amendment is about. The First Amendment is not about that every government building has to cater to every single religion. Because that's what's happening. The First Amendment doesn't say that the government has to cater to every single religion and religious belief in their state capitals. No. The founders would never have even conceived something like that. Of course they wouldn't have. That's not what the First Amendment is about. But I also want to say it's kind of a funny dichotomy here. It kind of shows the hypocrisy of a lot of these people. Because in one sense, they say, well, we believe in freedom of speech. We believe that in religious diversity. We believe in freedom of religion, that you should be able to practice your religion. And if you're a Satanist or if you're something other than a Christian, well, you should have your symbol in the State House as well. And we just do this because we believe in diversity and freedom. They'll say it then. But then when you have, say, oh, I don't know, a Christian baker who really is just a Christian, and he doesn't want to bake a cake for a gay wedding because it's against his religious beliefs. All of a sudden, these same people who say they believe in diversity of thought, who say they believe in diversity of religion, all of a sudden they don't want it then. Oh, no, you're a bigot. You should be forced as a business to bake that cake. Well, I thought you believed in freedom of religion. I thought you believed in the choice and the diversity. They don't believe in the diversity because this isn't about diversity of thought. This isn't about freedom of religion. It's about undermining Christianity any way they can. These same people, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, who are doing this at Illinois State Capitol, are the same ones who went after Christian Baker and other Christian organizations who don't want to go against their religious beliefs. That's what this is all about. And the hypocrisy is totally evident. What they want the government to do is not just to enforce freedom of religion. What they actually want the government to do, they'll never admit this publicly, but it is what they want. They want the government to force you, to prevent you from practicing your religion in public. That's what they want. They want to prevent you from practicing your religion. It's not freedom of religion, it's freedom from religion. And they actually believe the state should get in the way of you being able to practice your own religion. Because they don't like Christianity and they don't like religion. And that's what this is all about. Those are my thoughts on that. So speaking of faith and religion, we had the funeral today for George H.W. Bush. And this one thing came up, and it's been all over social media now. And it really is just beyond reason. It really is. So there was a part of, and I don't know if you've probably heard of this before. Have you ever heard the Apostles' Creed, Tom Benson?
Sure.
You're a Christian.
Yeah.
You've heard the Apostles' Creed. Mm-hmm. You know, some churches you go to and they'll actually recite it. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess during one part of the funeral and the program, there was a time where the congregation there at the funeral would recite the Apostles' Creed. Mm-hmm. Well, somebody took a picture and they noticed that while everyone else was reciting it, well, not everyone, but most everyone, that Trump and Melania were not reciting it. That they were kind of there and they were observing, and Trump, they both kind of had their hands folded, and Melania actually, his head is bowed a little bit. And so they were not reciting it while everyone else was reciting it. And everyone else is going out there and saying, oh, this is a curious moment. Oh, here's your so-called Christian president. He's not a Christian because he's not reciting the Apostles' Creed. This is really where we're going today in 2018. This is really where this is heading. It really is beyond reason. And some other people also noticed that some other people noticed that he wasn't singing as well at some of the songs. And this is all kind of proof that he's not really a Christian or something, or he's not the true evangelical. Now, the reason why I think really this is beyond reason is because, one, I've been to many different churches, Protestant churches. I've been to Catholic Mass before. Some people do the Apostles' Creed. Some churches do. Some churches don't. Some churches never do it. You would probably find Christians that have never really recited it. And in terms of singing, I this might make me a heathen, but sometimes I don't sing along either. No. Now, usually it's because I'm a drummer and I'm behind the drum set, and during the worship band I'm playing drums, but sometimes, you're just kind of listening, and you're just kind of worshiping that way, and you're just kind of taking in the mood of the room and trying to take in the spirit. You're not just singing, and I don't really have a good singing voice anyways, and I don't really, so I'm just kind of listening, and I'm just kind of there. Does that mean I'm not a Christian? Or sometimes some people, with the Apostles' Creed or something, they're not reciting it because they don't want to seem like zombies or something, but they're just kind of reading and following along. Maybe he's just not used to that. The idea that we have to nitpick every little thing that happens in every little instance with President Trump, and it somehow proves he's this or that, and now it's proof that he's not a Christian because he wasn't reciting one part of it. I mean, this is really where we're going. Maybe he was just honoring the moment and listening. I don't know. I don't know for sure. I don't know his heart. I don't know his mind. I wasn't there in his heart or mind. But I guarantee there were probably other people doing the same thing. They were just there, and they were observing, and they were listening. And they didn't realize, maybe I should recite this. I don't know why. I don't know. I just can't believe sometimes when I read this stuff where this stuff is going. Where this stuff. It's just like, really, people, you don't have anything better to do? 407-916-5400. You can text to 23680 where standard message and data rates apply. I want to get into some economic stuff. We've had the trade war, the not trade war, or whatever is going on with China and automobiles. We'll get to that next. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you miss any of the show, you can download the Beyond Reason podcast on iTunes. The place where we talk faith, culture, and politics. Beyond Reason Radio continues.
Yes, the place where we talk about, all the controversial stuff that some people don't want to talk about in a different company, but we get to all of it here on the show. I appreciate you all listening to the show tonight. I wanted to get to some Beyond Reason economics here, because the stock market especially has just been all over the place, and it seems like most everything that I hear about it, a lot of it has to do with fears of a trade war between us and China. There already has been kind of a trade war. A lot of this is implemented by Trump. It's Trump himself. He really believes in this, and he thinks it's going to work against China. We'll see. It hasn't so far. They've come up with somewhat of a deal, but not really a deal. And the other day it seemed like it was good news, and now it seems like it's bad news. We don't have details. I don't think anyone really knows what's going on. But Larry Kudlow, his chief economic advisor, talked about this. And go ahead and play that cut for me.
We are going to be looking at certain subsidies regarding electric cars and others, whether they should apply or not. I can't say anything final about that, but we're looking into it.
So that was what Kudlow had said last week after the whole GM thing. And Kudlow said that last week and was talking about subsidies for electric cars and electric vehicles, and that they were going to look at that. Now, I'm going to get to more of that in a second. But back to this whole tariff thing, go ahead and play cut 2 for me, Tom Benson.
I believe, President expects, I think he's right, he's going to get it, they will take their car tariffs down to 0. They were 15%, then they were knocked up to 40 as a retaliatory move, and I think you'll see pretty soon they'll be knocked down to 0. That's my guess. There was real chemistry between the two leaders, real chemistry. And as President Trump's tweets indicate, only they can get this done. I think that's correct. I think we're going to make great progress. I can't be more specific than that. But this is a bigger discussion, deal, commitment than anything we've had before.
So there you go. Now, he said there in the middle of it, he said, according to Trump's tweets, let's read some of Trump's tweets from yesterday. How about we get to that, huh? Seems a little different than what Larry Kudlow was saying. This is what's kind of weird to me about all of this. Here's what Trump said about all this. He said, the negotiations with China have already started. Unless extended, they will end 90 days from the date of our wonderful and very warm dinner with President Xi in Argentina. Bob Lighthizer will be working closely with Steve Mnuchin, Larry Kudlow, Wilbur Ross, and Peter Navarro. That's a weird group of people. Peter Navarro with Larry Kudlow. It's like two opposite ends of the spectrum there. On seeing whether or not Trump continues here, on seeing whether or not a real deal with China is actually possible. If it is, we will get it done. China is supposed to start buying agricultural product and more immediately. President Xi and I want this deal to happen, and it probably will. But if not, remember, I am Tariff Man. Tariff Man. I mean, what? I am Tariff Man. When people or countries come in and to raid the great wealth of our nation, I want them to pay for the privilege of doing so. It'll always be the best way to max out our economic power. We are right now taking in billions in tariffs, make America rich again. So what is it? Do you want the tariffs or not? I'm so confused because Trump, when I'm listening to Larry Kudlow, he's saying, oh, well, what's going to happen is we're going to get rid of tariffs on both sides and we'll have free trading with both sides and it'll be great. And I'm thinking, okay, that is great. That's a goal. That's wonderful. And then Trump kind of says, yeah, the negotiations are in. And then all of a sudden Trump goes, but I'm a tariff man, and I love tariffs, and we should have tariffs because we should pay whoever wants to do business in this country. And I'm like, but I thought, I'm like, what is it? I'm so confused.
Mr. Trump is a take it away from them type guy so he can give it back during negotiations.
Well, okay, some people think it's a negotiation tactic. Maybe it is. I don't know. There's a part of me that thinks it's really his economic philosophy that thinks tariffs are a good thing and that we should have these big tariffs and it'll make us richer, which, of course, that's not how trade works. It's just not how it works. But I will say this. I agree with Trump and Larry Kudlow on one thing, that we should get rid of these subsidies for electric cars. So Larry Kudlow came out earlier this week, and this is according to Bloomberg, and he said this. He said, as a matter of our policy, we want to end all of those subsidies going to electric cars. And by the way, other subsidies that were imposed during the Obama administration, we are ending, whether it is for renewables and so forth. I could not agree with this policy more. I think this is the right decision. Why do we have a subsidy? We have a subsidy to try to force people into a certain market that they really don't want to get to in the first place. That's why. They want to force people into these electric cars that are really expensive and can be really expensive to maintain, and that the people really don't like as much as their gas cars. And so the thing is, well, we have to add all these restrictions, and then later we have to add a carbon tax and all of this and gas taxes so we can kind of force people because they believe it's the government's job to influence what you buy. And I think this is wrong. In fact, how about we get rid of all subsidies? How about we just tax everyone and every business the same rate and just be done with it? How about we just have a set of rules for every single business and every single person, and we just use those set of rules and we don't add all these other stipulations? Equality under the law? I mean, what a thought. That we just let the people decide. By the way, there's definitely some benefits to getting rid of the subsidies. It's funny, they thought the subsidies would save the planet, but what's really lowering greenhouse gases in this country is fracking, because we're fracking for natural gas, and natural gas has a lot less carbon emissions than coal and other things. So what has really brought down the carbon emissions in this country, probably more than anything, there's two things: nuclear energy, but especially lately, it's been natural gas done by fracking, which a lot on the left don't want to do. So there you go. All right, I appreciate you listening to the show today. If you missed any of the show, you can catch the podcast anywhere that podcasts are available, and you can catch it on Facebook as well. Like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. Follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R, and I will catch you guys next time.